Hi there. In this video, I want to go over what my typical quantum workday looks like. So what do I do? What do I prioritize? What do I incorporate? What order do I put it all in? And so here goes. First and foremost, first thing when I wake up in the morning, I always have my orange toned blue blockers on. That's a non-negotiable for me. Unless it's the very longest days of the year, when I typically wake up almost right at sunrise and don't have to do that. Otherwise, I always have those orange tone blue blockers on until sunrise. Sometimes it might be 5 minutes before, and I can just use natural light and open windows to illuminate my space. At that point, when I wake up first thing in the morning, my number one strategy, my number one priority is to rehydrate my body. I will have lost, through breath alone, you're going to lose about a quart of water, right? Through the process of breathing while I'm sleeping, let alone the water that actually the body processes and puts into my bladder to urinate out first thing in the morning. So I want to rehydrate. And the way that I rehydrate, and have been doing so now for a while and love it, is to consume a certain amount of what would be Quinton isotonic. I teach in other places how to actually transform water and Soleil into the same concentration as Quinton isotonic. That's actually what I've been consuming lately, but this video, it's too complex to go into for this video. It's actually not complex at all, but I'm going to let you know I consume a certain amount of isotonic water each morning first. I rehydrate with that beautiful blend of salt and minerals, typically around, let's say about 4 to 8 ounces of it, right? I'll consume 4 to 8 ounces of that, which is a lot, right? That's a lot, which is why Quinton's a little too expensive to do that on a regular basis. So I figured out how to make my own, and I'll consume about 4 to 8 ounces of that first thing, sometimes a little less than that. And then I wait about 5 minutes. And after about 5 minutes, I consume regular water till my body, like whatever my body wants, typically a pretty large glass of it, usually around, 10 to 12 ounces, which for me is a large glass to sip in one sitting. And I really consume that glass of water pretty darn quickly. And so that's my like immediate morning rehydration strategy. There are certain supplements I may actually take in the morning, and not actually supplements that, I don't take a handful of them anymore, but every once in a while in the morning, I'll have some Takasumi. And so Takasumi, for those of you who have been in my private membership community for quite some time now, have heard me refer to Takasumi from Supreme Nutrition. And that is the supplement that I'll use as just a general binder. We're exposed to a massive amount of toxins these days. So as much as I'm also living a quantum lifestyle, a healthy lifestyle, I still like to support my body's detoxification capabilities. And Takasumi about 2 or 3 days a week is one of the ways I do that. At that point in the morning, typically nowadays, I'm just gonna give you now, it's fall, right? And so now I actually have to have my orange tone blue blockers on, and I'm making lunches, and I'm getting the kids ready for school and all that stuff. And so I don't actually get to see the sunrise on a work day currently, until I'm really just ready to back the car out of the driveway. So I back the car out of the driveway, and that's the point where I, get the kids into the car, and I take off my orange tone blue blockers, and I stand outside for a little while, and I sky gaze, couple minutes. I also try to sky gaze while I'm like, okay, let me buckle my 4-year-old in, and let me turn around and let me sky gaze for 10 seconds. And we'll open the sunroof, we'll drive with the windows open, or if it's really cold, which it was this morning, there's periods throughout our drive that you can see a really, really bright sun, or the sunrise, or physically the sun coming up over the horizon. And so the kids know I'll roll down the windows at that time, and I'll yell sunrise eyes, and heads just turn east. And we all just look at the sun as it's all of its glory just coming up. And so that's what happens there. I'll drop the kids off at that point. And sometimes I'll actually go to a coffee shop where I used to work downtown in my city. And there's this coffee shop that I love all the people that work there, and all the people that come there. It's very much a community experience. And so sometimes I'll have some of their coffee. Sometimes I'll just go and say hi. If I'm having a cup of coffee that given morning, I will always consume extra water, because it is a diuretic. Coffee, regardless, is a diuretic. It could be even the greatest style coffee, right? I just got to try some of Dave Asprey's Danger coffee, and I love it. It's a great flavor. But even if I'm consuming coffee that's the highest quality, I am still consuming a lot of water to rebalance that. And oftentimes a decent amount of minerals in it as well. And so if I consume a cup of coffee like that, I'll always put some Shilajit in it. Sheila G from Zeb, Zeb over at clearly.com. That Sheila G is also going to give me a beautiful blend of earth-based minerals. It's going to give me a little bit of C60, a carbon 60 molecule, which is basically free electrons, and it has fulvic and humic acid in it. So in case there's any toxins in that coffee that also end up in my gut, I'm already giving my body some binders for it so that I'm hopefully not pulling it into my body and forcing my liver to detoxify it. I can just basically pull it into my colon and eliminate it that way. And so always Sheila G in it. Okay, so that's the point where I've pretty much seen my sunrise, I have my coffee, and at that same time, I typically don't drink a ton of that coffee until I'm home and also have breakfast with me. I try to consume all of that together. I will eat breakfast right when I get home from before I start my workday. And so that breakfast typically these days could look like leftovers from the day before, which could be anything, anything typically ancestral, really like the ancestral style eating, nutrient dense Weston A. Price style foods. Or in the first thing in the morning, if I'm just gonna make something, typically my go-to is eggs. I will cook 3, 4, 5 eggs, depending on what I'm craving, and I'm gonna add seasonal veggies to it. So the seasonal produce that's available to me is plentiful right now, but typically for breakfast, I still stick to a lower carb breakfast because it has just worked so well for my blood sugar, my energy, my mood, just how everything just feels really stabilized when I support that leptin signaling in the morning with it. And so those eggs will get some combination of things like mushrooms and onions and garlic. And I love cabbage, some cabbage in it as well. And that's what I'm going to consume. It's a decent size, right? I'm going to make a big bowl of that and consume it. Sometimes I'll add things with it as well. So lately I've been doing a trial run of black sesame paste or black sesame tahini, because I read in the traditional Chinese medicine Materia Medica that consuming that for 100 days straight was considered a cure for anything. I'm testing it out, right? And it's also been shown that if it's consumed for a year straight or 2 years straight, it actually also supports melanin producing pathways in the body, which melanin is key, right? Melanin is a pigment that's on our skin and in our bodies that actually can give us free energy in the form of electrons being held by hydrogen, or antioxidant effects from molecular hydrogen generation as well. So that melanin, all the things that support melanin, I'm all for. And so I'll consume some of that paste with it, maybe. Sometimes I'll consume some like a little bit of kefir or fermented foods, like some fermented sauerkraut with it as well. I do love those ferments. My body handles them so well. They're so nourishing and supportive. I just get this sense of just health and healing when I consume them. And then that's breakfast. And then sometimes I'll have to come to my office right away downstairs. It's a downstairs office. I'll have to come downstairs right away and get some work done. But always in the morning, I will carve out at least a 15-minute, if not a 2-hour chunk of time, depending what my day looks like, to take a walk. That's going to straddle some portion of UVA rise. UVA rise walks has been a game changer for me. Not only do I walk, right, and do that walking, but I also, which is a great movement, right? But I also love the mood enhancement, the focus, the concentration boosting that comes from getting that UVA rise. At some point throughout this stretch, I will have touched the bare earth. Sometimes it's with my earthing sandals. I wear my earthing sandals as much as I can, and I'll just be standing on my lawn, basically touching the earth before I actually go on my walk through the neighborhood. So that can be it. Sometimes I actually get to see the sunrise outside, like on a weekend, and I'll be earthing then as well. And when I get back from my walk, I love to go into the backyard and sun my abdomen, sun my back, things that weren't able to get exposed to the sunlight on my walk. And so I'll do that. I'll try to get that at least 3 to 5 minutes, if not longer, of light, as much full body light as I can. Then I'm at the office, right? And I always bring water with me. And I typically bring 2 different types of water. I bring water that has a higher concentration of the Soleil. So typically in this half-liter bottle, I'll have about 2 tablespoons of Soleil. So it will have a saltier component to it. I will also have just water that it's just naturally remineralized, but I use the spring aqua system, but this could just be really good quality filtered water with a couple of drops of Soleil in it for remineralization. And it's on the floor. I'm not going to reach it right now, but I also have my little baggie of just sea salt in general. And so throughout being in this type of an environment, I got a closed window. I have a computer screen. Now everything is hardwired for me, right? I hardwire everything. So this is a lower non-native EMF environment, but that doesn't mean that there's also not non-native EMFs coming from my neighbors, coming from radio stations and other things outside. And so I want to stay hydrated and I want to retain minerals. And I've just gotten into this routine of, what am I craving? Like right now, I'm sensing that I'm craving some a sip of a little bit more saltier solution. And so I'll do it, right? And then I'll just see, I'll wait and I'll just check in with water. If any of you have seen me in a Q&A before, I always have water and I'm just sipping it periodically. And so my goal throughout the course of the day is to consume somewhere around 2 liters of water, like more if I've had coffee, right? And so that's going to be just a really good strategy. And I want to make sure I have adequate amounts of sea salt. The reason I love the sea salt dissolved into the water is because it's ionized. The minerals. The minerals are ionized, meaning they've got a charge that pulls them in. I absorb them much better. And so it's just been a really profound rehydration strategy for me. Didn't even know that I think I was living at that threshold of being dehydrated all the time. And the majority of people are in a state of chronic unintentional dehydration. And in order to rehydrate from that state, we have to use sea salt dissolved in water and regular pure water as well. We have to start making sure our body has access to those things regularly. The other thing that I have here, obviously I'm wearing my yellow tone lenses. These yellow tone lenses feel really good for me when I'm behind glass and in front of a computer. Sometimes my computer has a more intense mitigation strategy with something like Iris Tech, which I'm going to do in a separate video. I'll talk about in a separate video. Sometimes it's not, because sometimes I'm working on something and I've got such a bright light coming from the window in front of me that I actually have to mitigate some of the blue blocking strategies there. And so these glasses I have found to be just very, very calming for my vision, for my focus, for my alertness, my concentration. And I love wearing them anytime I'm in front of a screen. They have been so amazing for me. But when I go upstairs periodically, which I do, and I mean, some of my colleagues who, we maybe like my colleague Sarah, who we have a podcast regularly. Some of my colleagues will know that sometimes I might be 3 minutes late, or Sarah, you're right. Sometimes I might be 5 or even 7 minutes late to our podcast session, because after sitting for a certain amount of time here, I have to get up. I want to move my body. I want to empty my bladder too sometimes as well, but I want to move my body. I want to stand up. And in between sessions, I don't ever really tell anyone this, but I stand and I do what I call my posture check. So I'll stand up. This is not necessarily quantum, mildly embarrassing. I'll do my posture check. For me, my posture check is I make sure that I've basically drawn, if I drew a line from the side of my body right here, right? And right down the side, I'm lining my ear, my shoulder, my hip, my knee, and my ankle bone, my lateral malleolus right there. And then I'm making sure that I'm standing tall enough. And so I just lift my hands in front of me, basically like this, up, out to the side, down a couple of times. I have a strong core engagement as well. And then I sit back down. Crazy, huh? But it's what I do, right? I want to make sure that I'm maintaining, and I'll even do that when I'm sitting too. Like before I hop on a call, I'll even make sure I'm really trying, I'm not getting into this slouched head forward posture, right? I'm really trying to stay lifted and strong through my postural muscles. Let's see what else. Okay, so I periodically take my light breaks. That's what I was saying with being late for a podcast appearance with Sarah or something like that. I will go outside, even if it's 30 seconds. I'll go out and I'll sync up. Ideally, it's 10 to 15 minutes every couple of hours. I'm going back up, naked eyes, as naked as I can make my body be, depending on what I'm wearing, time of year, things like that. And I'm just sinking back up and soaking it in. I also have underneath my desk one of these mats from Intuition Position. And so I do have a grounding mat from her. I keep my feet on it to gather electrons when I'm in this type of an environment. I find it, again, to be very supportive. It also helps me to remind me I'm a mover. I wiggle. It helps to remind me to keep both feet flat. I like to sometimes get into this habit of crossing my leg and leaning, and that's not great for posture, right? It's not great for muscle balance because I have a tendency to go on one side only. So I try to make sure I have my feet flat on that, and so that I can maintain this good postural balance. What else do I do? Well, let's see. That's really truly throughout my workday, right? That's me. I'm taking breaks, light breaks. I'm drinking water. I'm standing up. I'm moving occasionally to change my posture. Sometimes I'll even go and I'll do some lunges or some push-ups or something that just gets my blood flowing. Now we're going to fast forward till when work is done. When work is done, I want to go outside. I need to at least sit on my porch or play with the kids, run around in the yard. I want to do that for a little while, at least 20 minutes, sometimes a lot more than that. And so that's what I'm going to do. And then sometime throughout those afternoon hours, I will get in a session of red light therapy, or I'll get in a sauna session. I do love to integrate that as well. Sometimes it'll be like a more intense activity. Like I'll play one-on-one basketball with my oldest son, something like that. Just get moving, get sweating. And then, typically my next meal, sometimes I'll have another meal from sunrise. I'll typically go about 5 or 6 hours, and then I'll have my next meal. And that meal will be usually of a really balanced blend. I would call it a balanced blend of meats or fish and some local vegetables, local seasonal vegetables. And that does include things like starches. I will eat potatoes and sweet potatoes. I'm leptin sensitive, right? So my body actually likes that. I like that type of a meal, but it's smaller because I really get a lot of nutrients and satiety with breakfast. And so then 5 or 6 hours later, I'll have that meal. And then sometimes towards dinner time, which is typically within about an 8 to 10 hour fueling window, I'll have a small thing as well. If I'm making something for the family, which I try to do as much as possible, I'll have a small portion of that as well. And then, I don't get cravings anymore. I used to get hangry cravings all the time for sugar and just eating and grazing, and I just don't anymore. So then I'll just cut off my fueling window then. My husband and I have gotten into this lovely habit of sitting on the porch together. Our front porch faces west, so that's our sunset time. We like to just sit out there, kind of once all the craziness of sports and dinner and homework and all those things are done, we just typically sit out there together and we get to chat and watch the sunset. And then so I'll do that on a regular basis. And then when I come inside and it's sometime between sunset and nightfall, I will put my orange toned blue blockers on. And then, we'll just kind of, I'll kind of start my wind down time. That could look like a lot of different things depending. Sometimes wind down with the family is legitimately watching a football game because the family loves to watch football or a movie. Sometimes it's reading. Sometimes it's just kind of, there's another window that we can sit by just in a room and just kind of hang out with open windows still and as the sun goes down. We'll do that on the weekends as the sun comes up too. Sometimes we'll get our morning time out there, but anytime we're inside, we'll just sit in that room with all those big open windows. And then at night, I'm a big believer. Like I express gratitude at night. Like nighttime is really where I'm gonna get some really good gratitude in. I also express gratitude first thing in the morning. I have a couple of different, either a combination of prayers and mantras and just saying thanks in my mind. I just have this gratitude that I express first thing in the morning when I'm sunrise gazing and before I go to bed as well. And so that's just a really calming and settling way for me to kind of just get into to facilitate sleep. In my sleep space, it's dark. Sometimes I feel like if I go places, I do wear a sleep mask. I feel like that can be very, very beneficial. But otherwise, in my typical sleep setting, it's very dark, which I love. And I go to bed. I fall asleep pretty darn close to around anywhere between 8 and 9, depending on the time of year. And I just allow my body a long enough time to sleep and just be in bed and get all the restoration that it needs. And that's my typical work day. Now, when I'm on a walk, sometimes I'll throw in what I call a paced breath hold, meaning I'll just consciously inhale and hold my breath and walk and see how many paces I can walk while holding my breath, and I'll count. And that just gives me a goal, right? I'm working on expanding my carbon dioxide tolerance levels. And so then I'll, another maybe 5 or 10 minutes later, I'll do it again and I'll try to go 1, 2, 3 steps further. And I'll do that periodically throughout my walk, just as a very basic way to pay attention to my breath and my carbon dioxide capacity. Now, before I was aware of being a bad breather at work or all day long, I was a horrible breather. I was a mouth breather, right? I actually did mouth tape in the office when I wasn't working one-on-one with clients to make sure my mouth was shut, because I was probably had my mouth open all the time. And then same thing at night. I used to mouth tape at night as well. But now I've worked on it enough. I've worked on my tongue positioning on the roof of my mouth, and I've made a conscious effort, and it no longer takes effort for me to close my mouth and place the tongue on the roof of my mouth and breathe through my nose. But that was part of the transition. I did do some mouth taping during the day and night in order to remind me to breathe through my nose. So there you have it. That's the general gist of what my typical day looks like. Sometimes there's a lot of other things I sometimes throw in, from myofascial release to laying on my prana mat to really hardcore intense workouts, some sprinting, something like that. But really, that's my day. The only other thing that I sometimes incorporate every once in a while is I like to take magnesium before bed, but I like to take it as a transdermal spray. So I typically use a form of transdermal magnesium that I spray on my abdomen and allow that just to settle. And that will kind of help give me that magnesium support at night, since I think the majority of us are magnesium deficient. So there you have it. That is my typical day. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you have any questions, let me know, and we'll talk next time.